Today I brought something simple. A bowl, a towel, a basin of water. Nothing ornate, nothing polished, no gleaming chalices, no embroidered vestments. These are just the tools of a servant that we saw in the Gospel of John. In John 13, on the night before betrayal, before arrest, before the cross, these ordinary objects became the clearest revelation of who Jesus is and who you and I are called to be. Because when everything is about to unravel, when the powers of the empire are closing in, when fear and violence are only hours away, Jesus doesn't gather his disciples to assert dominance or to call names or to blame people for what is about to take place. No. Knowing full well the state of the world and what is to come, Jesus kneels. There is a certain cultural shock of this basin and towel. To feel the full force of this moment, we must step back into the first century. The roads of Palestine, they were not paved. They were dusty paths, layered with dirt and mud and animal waste. And people walked everywhere. Sandals were the norm, leather soles strapped loosely to the feet. And after a day's journey, feet would be cracked, perhaps blistered, and certainly filthy. Hospitality was sacred in Jewish culture. It was not an optional courtesy, it was faithfulness. Abraham had welcomed strangers. The Torah repeatedly commanded care for the sojourner. To receive someone into your home was to participate in God's own welcome of them. When guests entered a home, water would be offered. But the actual act of washing someone's feet, that task belonged to the lowest servant in the household, often a Gentile slave. Jewish servants could be asked to perform many tasks, but rabbinic teaching drew a line here. Washing feet was considered to be so degrading that it was reserved for the non-Jewish slaves. The Greek word for the slave is doulos, and it was the slave who was tasked with things like cleaning the latrines. Now, foot washing here was not something that was symbolic. It was something that was humiliating for the servant having to do it. Remember the setting. This whole thing takes place during Passover. Jerusalem would have been overflowing with pilgrims. Roman soldiers were on heightened alert. You see, Passover celebrated liberation from oppressive powers of an empire. And Rome, they didn't appreciate the talk of liberation. Tension hung in the air. This meal itself followed a sacred rhythm: unleavened bread, bitter herbs, cups of wine, the retelling of the Exodus. And at some point in the evening, someone most likely would have washed the feet of those reclining at the table. Reclining meant lying on one side, feet extended outward behind the next person, every face close, every foot exposed, and no one moved. Luke tells us that just before this meal, the disciples had argued about who among them was the greatest. In a culture that was structured around honor and shame, status mattered, rank mattered, seating order mattered. Now, up to this point, no one has washed anyone's feet yet. And then Jesus rises. And John writes something remarkable. He says, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to God. John's gospel constantly emphasizes knowledge. Jesus knows here his hour has come. He knows his origin. He knows his destiny. This is not an impulsive act. It is deliberate revelation. Knowing his authority, knowing his identity, and knowing his destiny. He kneels. This is not weakness. This is strength rooted in love. He removes his outer robe, a foreshadowing of the stripping to come at Golgotha. The verb John uses here echoes the laying down of life in chapter 10. I lay down my life. And here he lays down his garment. He wraps a towel around his waist, the clothing of a slave. He pours water into a basin. He kneels before them one by one. Before Peter, the one who would deny him. Before Thomas, the one who would doubt him. And before Judas, the one who would betray him. And in that moment, everything, every hierarchy collapses. And leadership is redefined. Greatness is inverted. And power stoops. Philippians 2 echoes this holy inversion, this holy moment. Though he was in the form of God, he emptied himself, taking the form of a servant. In a Roman world that was obsessed with dominance and conquest and visible power, this is revolutionary. Caesar ruled through spectacle and force. Jesus reigns through kneeling love. Jesus doesn't lose authority when he kneels. He reveals what a divine authority actually looks like. Now, Peter's protest here is actually a scandal of grace. Peter cannot tolerate this. No, Lord, you will never wash my feet. And Peter understands what this means. If Jesus kneels, then everything changes. If Jesus kneels, then no one gets to cling to superiority. And Jesus answers, unless I wash you, you have no part of me. Grace must be received before it can be lived. We're not self-made servants. We are washed into servanthood. And John makes something crystal clear here. Jesus knows that Peter will deny him. Jesus knows that Judas will betray him. He knows the others are going to scatter. And yet, he still washes all of their feet. This is not a sentimental act of love. This is defiant grace. He kneels before the betrayer. He kneels before the denier. He kneels before the fearful, which means he kneels before us. This is the gospel in its purest form. We're not loved because we're worthy. We're loved because God is love. Luther often reminded us that we are simultaneously sinner and saint. We are broken and beloved. And Christ kneels before both. Let me take you to a very different place. It's a small village in the bush of Uganda. Red dirt roads stretching under a wide African sky. Acacia trees scattered across the horizon. Goats wandering, children barefoot and laughing. Grass roof huts dot the landscape. And into that place stepped Mike. Mike is a 6'3", muscular, long-time high school football and baseball coach. In his town, he's known as a strong, steady, commanding man. He runs disciplined practice. He expects effort. He builds toughness. And when he joined our mission trip, there was a certain amount of anxiousness about him. He wasn't sure what he could offer in rural Uganda. One afternoon, our team gathered under the shade of a large acacia tree in the heat of the African sun. Widows in the community were invited forward to receive a pedicure and what we call a Ugandan spa day. In reality, this was a foot washing with a little twist. It is a gesture of honor and deep respect. And on this day, a widow stepped forward and took a seat in a plastic chair under this large tree. Her back slightly bent, her dress faded from years of wear, her feet bare, deeply cracked from years of walking on the hard ground. And Mike hesitated, and then he kneels. He kneels nervously before this frail widow. He was used to lifting weights, used to shouting encouragement from the sidelines, used to standing tall. And now he was asked to kneel in the dust. And he knelt. The red dirt stained his knees. The air was thick with heat and stillness. And he gently lifted her fragile feet, thin, calloused, marked by time. He poured water slowly over them, and he washed her feet as if they were sacred. And then he dried them gently. It was quite a sight to watch this football coach and father of 3 boys not only wash her feet, but then also gently paint her toenails with nail polish. Now, there was no applause, no recognition, no scoreboard, just quiet dignity. And when he finished, she gently placed her weathered hands over his. There was a young man, her son, standing nearby, and he began to cry. And he said softly, "I've never seen anyone treat my mother with such respect." This wasn't pity. This wasn't charity. This was simply pure respect. Mike later said that moment changed him more than any championship ever had. Because strength that stoops is strength transformed. Jesus didn't lose authority when he knelt. He revealed what true authority looks like. Now let me take you to France, 1942. Nazi forces had occupied the country. Jews were being rounded up and deported. Fear was pervasive. Informants lurked, it seemed, everywhere. Entire communities lived under the shadow of violence. And in the mountainous region of south central France sat a small Protestant village, Le Chamon-sur-Léon. Its residents were descendants of Huguenots, Protestants who themselves had faced persecution centuries earlier. Their history seems to have carved empathy into their bones. And their pastor, André Trocmé, stood in the pulpit and preached words that echoed Jesus. "We do not know what a Jew is. We only know men." In other words, we refuse to reduce people to categories. Families from the village, from the church, began hiding Jewish children in their homes. Farmers sheltered entire families in their barns. Teachers falsified documents. Village doctor forged medical certificates to prevent deportations. And when Nazi patrols arrived, watchers stationed along the roads would signal Jewish families to slip into the forests. And here's the detail that pierces my heart every time I hear it. When the danger had passed and the Nazis had left the villagers would sing. They sang a familiar hymn, steady, strong. And when those who were hiding in the woods heard the song drifting through the hills, they knew it was safe to come home. Imagine crouching in cold underbrush, heart racing, every snap branch sounding like boots approaching. And then hearing music, hearing a song calling you home. Before explanation, the body knows. Safety, mercy, home. Over the course of the war, approximately 5,000 Jewish refugees were sheltered there. Many were smuggled safely into Switzerland. Now, the people of the village, they didn't see themselves as heroes. They saw themselves as followers of Christ. They were not powerful, they were not famous, but they knelt, they risked. They sang safety into a violent world. That is foot washing. That is Micah 6:8, lived out, do justice, love mercy, walk humbly. Caring for others is music worth singing. It is the music of grace. It is the music that brings people out of hiding, out of unease, and out of fear. Songs that invite courage and renewal and resilience. Songs that let us know it's safe to come home. This I know. I want a world where it is safe for everyone to come home. I want to live in a world where fear is not the final word. A few years ago at a migrant shelter near the U.S.-Mexican border, volunteers noticed something small but profound. When people were being released from detention, they realized that their shoelaces had been removed. Walking without laces is unstable. It was to prevent the migrants from trying to escape. It's hard to run when you don't have shoelaces in your shoes. So volunteers began kneeling down and re-threading their shoes. It seems insignificant until you realize they were kneeling before people that our culture debates and politicizes. They were restoring dignity one lace at a time. That is John 1. Let us love, not in word or speech, but in truth and action. Years ago, when Pope Francis knelt in a Roman prison to wash the feet of inmates, including men convicted of serious crimes, it startled the world. But Jesus washed Judas' feet. Foot washing insists that dignity does not disappear when someone falls. Accountability and mercy can coexist. No one is reducible to their worst moment. Never look down on anybody unless you're helping him up. Those were the words of Jesse Jackson. Now that is the music of grace. And the gospel presses in. Who have we quietly decided is undeserving? Our political rival, the immigrant, the addict, the one who hurts us, the one whose views offend us? It's easy to wash clean feet. It's harder to kneel where resentment lives. In this season of Lent, it dismantles superiority. It reminds us that we are dust. It reminds us we are dependent on grace. And when we remember who has washed our feet, mercy becomes harder to withhold. Jesus says servants are not greater than their masters. If he kneels, we kneel. If he serves, we serve. If he loves beyond comfort, we love beyond comfort. Don't tell me what you believe, show me. You cannot adore Jesus and yet then ignore the dirty feet in front of you. So let's bring this home. So I ask you, who has washed your feet? Who forgave you? Who stood with you? Who saw you in your worst moment and did not walk away? You felt it before you could name it. Belonging, worth, home. Now, whose forest are you near? Who is hiding in fear, waiting to hear your song? Whose cracked feet are in front of you? Maybe it's not dramatic. Maybe it's a conversation, an apology, a refusal to join in cruelty, a meal delivered, a visit made, a quiet act of mercy. Foot washing is rarely glamorous. It's often inconvenient, and sometimes it's costly. But it is always intimate, and it is always holy. Today we stand in the calm before the storm. A towel, a basin, water. Soon there will be nails, a cross, darkness. But it's the same love. A love that kneels. A love that risks. A love that restores dignity. A love that sings safety into fearful places. And so we follow. Not because we're perfect, but because we've been washed. And if we know these things, Jesus says we are blessed if we do them. So may we be people who kneel. May we be people who choose mercy over cruelty. May we be people whose lives become songs of safety. And may someone somewhere hear your compassion and know it's safe to come home. Amen. It shall be so.